We propose that the most important thing to understand is to align the elements of the super system with your vector of goals. You remember what is management? The vector of goals, the vector of the current state, the vector of error. If in your vector of goals you have one situation at the top, if they do rather, one goal, but we are proposing different goals. That's it. That is, if they have a principle and a vector of goals established, everyone for themselves, you have to spin, then we say whether you spin or not. That is, we dispel illusions and say that lending should be interest-free, and so on. In other words, the principle is clear. We propose our vector of goals as we see fit. And people, even those journalists who do not understand what is happening, they begin to work towards our vector of goals. How? I explain. Imagine you are a journalist, and you are saying or writing something, and suddenly a journalist appears who writes something cooler than you. They introduce some new terms, and your publications are no longer interesting. You think, what should I do? I need to shine with something. And then such information comes in and he says, oh, I will write about this. And he writes. That is, he spreads our information. And since he spreads our information, he works for us, for the achievement of the goals we have set. The same applies to all parties. Here is the party. They are defending some ideals, seeing that the people do not understand them. They think about what to do, what to come up with, because they have nothing to say to the people. All parties, nothing to say to the people. And now, look at our program and read what we offer. Therefore, whether they like it or not, they start to say what we propose, and many are surprised. They say, Mr. Pavlovich, why is it that what you say is being said on television? And we say, well, let them say it, for God's sake. This is what the system of control interception consists of. In this sense, we tell our activists and supporters of the public safety concept what is the thesis. And there is no need to wait for anything. Our people believe that to change the situation, one must take something and run somewhere. To hit someone on the head, to shoot at someone, to change something. We say no, there is no need for any of that. You can work on our concept, on the moral concept, our common one. How? Here is the lower picture. For example, you are a teacher in a school. An ordinary teacher in a school. You teach certain subjects, you explain. You have become familiar with this concept. And you start telling this to the children in school. Here we already have such examples, and there are many examples across the country. What are you doing? You are taking control. That is, by telling children about the Trinity, about the priorities of generalized means, about alcohol, not because it shouldn't be consumed, but because you can get drunk and choke on your own vomit, but because it is a tool of control. Tell the girls how multiple sexual encounters before marriage affect childbirth. That is what we have. What are you doing? Take control with this satanic concept. They will no longer run around with beer cans when they understand the depth of it. And if this is done from childhood, who is stopping? No one is stopping. Moreover, you can tell this to your school principal. We already have this everywhere. That is, the takeover is happening from the bottom up, and there is no need to wait for any instructions. For example, our party organization in Chelyabinsk region is headed by Anatoly Georgievich Shipitsin, Doctor of Technical Sciences, Professor. He is engaged in serious scientific activities there. He is the head of the Department of Control Systems. He reads all of this to his students. We even have permission from the Ministry of Education that as courses, author programs can include all of this. What is the policy there? About philosophy, about psychology, about control theory, about economics. Who prevents you from telling? There is also such an opinion, varied education. There were policies there about philosophy, psychology, ratio, and management, about economics. Who prevents you from transforming, so to speak? Let's say there is such an opinion, varied education, that is, everything is allowed. Everything is allowed. You can also present this, that is, you are already intercepting. Or, for example, I talked about the school. Take a workshop. We have these examples. Or some factory. An ordinary worker. He tells the workshop manager or even the director of the factory. What is happening? How he tells the workers who prevents? No one prevents. Already from below, this interception is happening. We influence both the government and the president and the Duma, I assure you. You must understand, what is this about? They are the elite. They are all in trouble after all. Just imagine, for example, you are the governor. Do you have any doubts that there is at least one governor in our country who is as pure as a child's tear? No, of course not. They all grabbed their share, and having grabbed, they fell for the Kuklan of Gorovsky's project. Two paths, either Nara or Canaries. No one wants Nara, so then they face a moral choice. What to do? Learned all this. Why do they keep silent? There is nothing to refute. To acknowledge the truth means to put oneself before a moral choice. And who will I be there? Will I be the boss? What a block it is. The same applies to scientists. Just imagine, you are scientists. You have taught this economic nonsense in universities for more than 1 year. You have obtained an academic degree, a professor title, like Glaziev, or all the others. And what? Now you have to go out and say that all of this is nonsense, that everything is wrong. It's also a moral choice. Many ask us, who supports you? How can this elite support anything if they are all in trouble? Therefore, the salvation of drowning people is the responsibility of the drowning themselves, that is, the people, and we primarily appeal to the youth. The future of the country is with you. This is necessary. It doesn't mean that there are no normal people in the elite, and we are against them. What is the speech about to Zhuganov, for example? Did you see my conversation with him on television, which was on the 3rd channel during the debates? He was told that the only party in our country is yours, because all the others are not parties, they are just rude people with bags of money. Remove the money, and none of these parties will exist. You at least have some ideology, but this ideology is false, incorrect, and it needs to be revised. Therefore, he was told to revise it back in 1993. I personally suggested that at least within the framework of the CPRF party, a department be created to consider promising ideologies for the party's development. After all, no one was stopping him. Why? Because he grew up in this for many years, was a secretary and so on. And in general, they say, what is speech for a normal person about moral choice? One must take off their hat and say, dear brothers and sisters, I was a little mistaken. We have a mistake with Marxism here. Let's reconsider. Well, what's so scary about that? In my opinion, there's nothing scary about it. A person has the right. From my own life, when I made some mistakes, I would go out in front of the officers and say, comrades, officers, I was wrong. So what's really so frightening about that? Indeed, it's truly a question of a person's morality. It seems there is nothing frightening about it. This is determined by the morality of this person. That is why he stands on these dogmas. He led the party to its only collapse. Now you see in the CPRF that they are trying to intercept this party. Who? The oligarchs, because they see this power. Because in modern society, coming to power is ensured. It must be through party structures. That's the thing. Summarizing this takeover of control, we also get distracted. But I think it's useful to have a holistic understanding. So what is it about, schematically, knowing a fairly general theory of management? Object, subject of management, managerial influences, result, feedback. So, how to take over management? It is necessary to influence the object and the subject informationally, to comment on documents, to close feedback on oneself, of course, to understand what is happening, and through informational influence to set one's vector of goals so that people work towards it, perhaps without even realizing it. And this process is already underway, and conscious understanding is even better. And this process, it is happening. Both our party structures and all supporters of the concept of public safety are implementing this in a non-structural way. There are no special structures, but the information itself works. This is how we were taught. They took the country. If we talk about the events happening in our country, in the concept of public safety, they are described in relation to the elite. A short tacking maneuver is being carried out. It is generally called a cow tacking maneuver. You know, when a cow walks in a field chasing its own tail, it results in something similar. So it goes in one direction, goes, and then turns completely in the other. Well, in the Navy, in sailing, this maneuver, when a ship needs to turn right, but when the crew is not coordinated, it is a dangerous maneuver. The sailing ship can capsize, and then the captain decides to perform this cow tacking maneuver. The ship turns, goes left repeatedly, and then ends up on the right course. This is an illustrative schematic image. This section turns out to be somewhat unnecessary. The ship should go here, and this is somewhat unnecessary. It gets cut off. All of this is not needed. But pay attention to the poetic image in Pushkin's Egyptian Nights. What image? But only the morning purple will shine. I swear under the mortal axe, the head of the fortunate will fall off. These are the ones who wanted to sleep with Cleopatra. Just like that, our elite wanted to sleep. The head of those fortunate ones is already falling off. A short tack. And now this short tack is being done in Russia. It is defined by a fairly general theory of control. This is a maneuver that returns an unstable system to a stable balancing mode. A short tack is one of the measures of an alien conceptual power, the oldest maneuver known to us from history. Historically speaking, is what was done through Julian the Apostate. In fact, when it was necessary to establish Christianity in the world, the elite resisted. So Julian the Apostate brought this situation to absurdity. Then the elite followed him, returning to pagan values, and then a harsh circumcision was carried out. Julian the Apostate was destroyed. When he burned the ships in the war with the Persians, strict Christian regime was introduced, because at that time the elite, Rome was decaying, management had to be restored harshly, and this Christianity was used. Therefore, this version of the global predictor, short Avashtag, runs throughout the entire history of humanity. That is, the elite does not understand what is happening, they are led away, and then they are cut off, and a new one is put in their place. So from these positions, the overall course of Russia in the 20th century was as follows. Here is the timeline. And around this, a specific and detailed balancing regime took place. That is, the national economy and society were in a certain balancing regime. Well, here it is clear that in 1917 there was a loss of control over the country, and society went to the left. That is, into chaos. And we have already agreed that the left side is the left cause, unstable sleeves, while the right cause is a good, necessary cause. Therefore, the system went into chaos. It needed to be restored. And with the efforts of Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin and so on, the system was restored and went through the war. Here, indeed, in 1953, there was a hidden state coup. And after that, with the thaw of Khrushchev, our system went to the left, to the left. This ended with the times of stagnation under Brezhnev, when workers poorly performed in mines and plans were not fulfilled. A significantly smaller amount of gas and oil flowed to the western regions. The system needed to be returned back to a steadily stable balancing mode, but the elite got carried away. This maneuver, which is now actually coming to an end, was guilty in relation to the elite. They were indeed carried away by these democratizing transformations. And to bring the situation to such an absurdity as to lead to a harsh fascist regime, do you feel it right now, all these years, this short tack has been made? Thus, from a temporal perspective, this is essentially what happened. He basically took it here to the left, and it was... The period of hidden dual power has begun. During this time, an internal predictor of the USSR emerged, who proposed his concept. And here it is important that I will tell you about it now. The period of hidden dual power is characterized by a state of conceptual uncertainty. When there are two management concepts in society, imagine a super system with many elements and many people, while we are the super system in which one concept dominates in minds, that is, in achieving goals, and everyone is used to working towards the goals set by them. Another concept, strictly defined and lexical, is introduced into the super system, and it begins to take hold of people's minds. And the other concept has a different vector of goals, so it results in a kind of mental dilution. One concept says we need to go there, while the other says we need to go there. This state is called conceptual uncertainty. And this state, as it is, cannot be maintained for long. The system will go off the rails, meaning it will be torn apart. Thus, Russia is currently in a state of conceptual uncertainty. That is, when one concept has exhausted itself, this satanic biblical one, and our divine concept is already present in people's minds, it won't last long. Which concept do you think will win in the confrontation? Correct, ours. Why? Because what is emotionally said is God is with us. But how to express this in the terms of general theory of management? Very simply, God has a vector of goals. And the implementers of the public safety concept also have a vector of goals. The vector of goals of our concept coincides with the vector of hierarchically higher encompassing management. Does the vector of goals of the global mafia coincide? Does not. Who is stronger? Whose concept? Who will receive support from above? The answer is obvious. That's all. Why are we so sure that it is not we who will win as individuals, but the concept of public safety, the dead water, will win? Why? Because its ideals, everything it says, aligns with the vector of God's goals. And victory is inevitable. The only question is the degree of bloodshed in these events. And we want there to be less bloodshed, less suffering for people. Why? When everything is clear. And the speed of this process will depend on us, on how quickly we spread this information through the elements of the super system. Therefore, the task of both the party and its supporters is to convey this to all people as quickly as possible. So tell the story. This is what it is all about. And I take this opportunity to thank the organizers of all this, Viktor Borisovich Zagorchik, the head of our organization. What is happening here in Tyumen? All those who are sitting and helping to create this film. After all, with the help of this film, information will now spread in people's minds about students, about computers, video films, video lectures, because this is a new system of views. And we have a lot of literature and video cassettes. Now there will be diagrams on the computers, expand them, and then you won't be able to stop us. What is the speed of this process? And when will you win? And we say, if we wait. So if no one does anything, it will take a long time. But if we all work towards the vector of goals, teachers in schools, educators in kindergartens, workers in factories, we need to promote our people in legislative assemblies, cities, regions, and so on, then this process will happen very quickly. And most importantly, it won't be, like they have a destructive process that we became. In August, how the Democrats tortured me in 1991. Where were you on the night of August 18th to 22? We woke up in a different country. But here it will be quietly, calmly, without cataclysms, without revolutions. We don't need that. Why break people's destinies over the knee? What is this justified by? Remember the balancing modes and maneuvers. There are strong maneuvers when human destinies are broken over the knee, and weak ones when gradually, through the method of preemptive integration, which we are considering, they are introduced into the system in the necessary balancing mode. Whether you like this term or not, there is a gradual trimming of the so-called elite. All these efforts, all these chubezes, verbalizes, they are for nothing. They are not really needed at all in any way. The global mafia tried to do its own thing through them in their plans. But since in a state of conceptual uncertainty, when the internal predictor of the USSR formalized the concept of public security, expressed it in lexical forms, and so on, what was actually said. The confrontation of two concepts. You guys want your own, and we want ours, and we'll see whose will prevail. And since our vector of goals coincides with the vector of God, God is with us, as the song goes. Therefore, an in-depth and detailed analysis of the possible confrontation between these two important concepts. One concept is the Western one, that is, the power of the West, the global backstage, and so on. Here is our Russian concept. Who will win? I also think that victory will definitely be ours, because our vector of goals coincides with the hierarchically higher encompassing management. Moreover, the method of proactive integration will allow this to be done calmly, without breaking and destruction. And in this sense, as an example of illustration, many patriots, like General Ivashov and so on, NATO, they do not understand what Putin is doing. And Putin says, we are joining NATO. Now, do you understand what joining NATO means? We enter there and start spreading our information. So has globalization on Earth ended? It has ended. Is the submarine screwed? Screwed. Are the pipelines laid? Are communication and energy cables created? Created. Russia is one of the compartments. We can isolate ourselves from all the rest of humanity and say, here we have everything, and what do you have? No. Then from the neighboring compartments, they will break in and say, there will always be this global mafia, saying to the Germans, Hans and Fritz, meaning we live poorly because Russia does not give us gas and timber. And what will drunken Houston lead to? Do we need it? No. So, what should we do? We need to penetrate these countries and nations, spread information, and tell them, since we touched on the Hans and Fritz, to say, hey guys, how much profit are you making from Russia right now? They say, we are living quite well. 30, 40, 50% profit. And we will tell them that it's 3% or nothing. So what will the entrepreneurs choose? Between 3 and nothing, they will certainly choose 3%. Moreover, if we explain the consequences, what this will lead to. Therefore, we need to enter all organizations, the UN, NATO, and spread this information. That is to create a state of conceptual uncertainty. And the best way to do this is through science, through global symposiums and so on. And we are doing this, by the way. We have communication channels to Japan, China, and other countries, as well as to Harvard University and so on. In other words, all of this is already being done. Summarizing the processes occurring in super systems and considering the processes of concentrating control over the productive forces of humanity on planet Earth. What is it about? We are a super system. The super system is introduced into the environment. That is, humanity is created for what purpose? In order to achieve the goals that God has set for it, hierarchically higher encompassing management. In the broadest sense, these goals are related to the mastery of the potential for development by each person and humanity as a whole. That is, the genetically determined potential for the development of each person and the determined potential for the development of the super system as a whole. If the vector of goals for the functioning of the super system does not align with this vector of divine goals, then the system will go awry. To align the system with the vector of goals set by the hierarchically higher encompassing management, the depth of alignment of the vectors must be essentially as identical as possible. Recognition of this is achieved through mastering the sense of measure and considering the stability of processes based on predictability and what comes next. When the system fully masters its potential for development, and effectively, it must transition into a new qualitative state. And most importantly, we need to establish thoroughly and understand that, as you very well remember, we indeed examined the funnel with stepped edges, meaning that the mastery of the next stage by the super system can only be based on the mastery of the previous stage of development. One cannot surpass the measure of development. Therefore, the foundation for the existence of the next generation super system can only be the mastery of the development potential of the super system in which we currently live. Therefore, future generations of humanity will be based on what we do now. Thus, the task is exceptionally important. We live in an amazing time, humanity, when, having led humanity off the right path of development, the global mafia has brought all of humanity to catastrophe. And now, in order for the reproduction of generations on planet Earth to be sustainable, and for the super system to master its potential, we must solve the first task, to transition to the concept of public safety, in order to align the vector of God's goals concerning us with the vector that we propose. In other words, to align our vector of goals with the vector of goals concerning God, and having mastered the potential, prepare humanity for new explorations, for new stages of development. This is indeed the historical mission that now lies on our generation, our people, on our contemporaries. In this sense, the concept of public safety, the dead water, has global significance for all humanity on planet Earth, and perhaps for the existence of all civilizations in accordance with God's design in the universe as a whole. That's the thing.